So it's been a goal for me for several years, probably about 5 years, to ride the Ohio to Erie Canal, which goes from Cincinnati to Cleveland. It's about 326 miles. It's my understanding about 85% of that is paved. I have not done it yet. But what I did manage to do last year was ride some sections of the trail. And this section is from Sunbury to Gambier. It's about 30 miles. So I've heard people say that the bike trails in Ohio, are kind of like green corridors. And if you look at this, you can pretty much see that it's true. A lot of times you're going to have trees, on either side of you, flanking on either side. But often there's not a lot of depth. So this particular trail runs parallel to Ohio Route 36. And I think this is from after I leave Sunbury. This is the first section that crosses over 36. And you can tell that this particular section has a lot more depth. You would think you were in the woods. I would imagine in the heat of summer, it's probably a little bit cooler. But it's some awesome scenery. Some really questionable videoing skills throughout this presentation. This is my first attempt at doing that. So my focus, it seems the camera is aimed a lot at the asphalt. I'm actually missing some of the scenery, but I kind of think you can get the feel from just watching this that it's a pretty scenic ride. Also, lots of heavy breathing throughout this. Sometimes you can hear me changing gears. Hopefully next time I do a ride like this in video, I'll be in better shape. But I don't know, I find it kind of humorous. So a lot of times when I'm on the trail, I have a hard time deciding whether it's a rail trail or not. If you look over here to the right, that's a sure sign that it's a rail trail. I would assume that was a telegraph pole that ran parallel to the railroad at one time. One thing that kind of stands out about those is a lot of times they're pretty low. They're not very high. Another curious thing that I observe is sometimes you'll see one and you kind of wonder what happened to the rest of them. And every once in a while I'll be on Facebook Marketplace and I'll see people selling telephone poles and the like. I wonder if that's not what happens. Some farmers just go ahead and tear them out. Here's another tip for you. If you're traveling down the trail and you happen to see one of these marks on the trail, it signifies that there's a dip in the trail or there's some damage to the pavement. I looked at this one and hit it, but it does give me an opportunity to show you that I'm traveling at the blistering pace of about 10 miles an hour. Another sure sign that you're on a rail trail is when you start to see the gravel on the side. At least that's the way I see it. Here's the midpoint of the Heart of Ohio trail. I think it's saying, actually it's not a midpoint, it's marking the highest elevation, which is pretty evident when you cross over 36 again and you find yourself going downhill. It's worth noting here that the Ohio to Erie Trail is actually a collection of trails. I just mentioned the Hoot Trail, or the Heart of Ohio Trail, which is where I spent probably about half this ride on. I noted that was the highest elevation of the ride, or at least of the Hoot Trail. It becomes pretty evident as you cross over 36 that you're going downhill. A lot of times I didn't notice that I was going uphill. I don't know if you ever had that experience or not, but it just seems a little bit harder. But when I hit this other section, I mean, I felt like I was really rolling. I figured out at this point that this is a rail trail for sure, and I could really imagine the train rolling into Mount Vernon, which is coming up in just a little bit. So I'm getting ready to roll up on the Aerial Foundation Park, which has a really interesting story. It's about 250 acres. It's the remnants of the PPG plant, which they made plate glass, which Pittsburgh plate glass. They've left some remnants of the building. A little bit before this, you saw a smokestack that they turned into an observation deck. This is one of the buildings they turned into, I assume, an event center. Now I'm rolling into Mount Vernon, and this is the Kokosing River to my left. And this is the trail kind of in downtown Mount Vernon. And I'm giving you a view of some grass here. I guess I need to get a little bit better at my editing. So now we're still in downtown Mount Vernon. Part of the land, I think there's going to be a park on the right, is controlled by Mount Vernon Nazarene University. And there's some ball fields here. Also some high power lines. You might hear the buzz of those high power lines even after this edit.
Morning.
I kind of made a habit of anybody I passed on the trail of saying hello or good morning. I don't think anybody responded.
Morning.
The river is very scenic as I look at it to the left. This video really doesn't do it any justice, or enough justice, I don't think. I actually shot this as my first time trying to shoot a ride. I had an iPhone that it was handheld, kind of dangerous, probably an iPhone 11 or 13. It's an older iPhone, but definitely not the way to go. Although I made it work for this ride. I kind of I made a pledge to myself that I would get a GoPro as soon as I lost 25 pounds. That was about 6 months ago. I still only have 25 pounds to lose. So at one point near here, I looked over into the river and there was a guy fly fishing. It was really a pretty cool scene. He was actually there on the ride back as well. In retrospect, I wish I would have stopped and asked him if it was okay if I recorded him a little bit, because it was just kind of really neat to look at. So here in a second, we're going to come up on a historical marker. That marker is at a trailhead, and it marks the entrance of the Kokosing Gap Trail as well, which is by far the most scenic part of the trail. The historical marker talks about the little Indian village, and apparently there were Indian encampments on either side of the river at this point. There's also some mention of Johnny Appleseed, who had property in this area, and I guess they argued for years with respect to what language was going to go on the sign, and it's sad that I don't really know the exact language on there. Maybe you could read it. This section of trail is probably by far the most scenic. It's probably a 4 or 5 mile section. Of course, I have no video. I go off the trail here, and I'm just south of Gambier, to go to Norris Grain Farm, which is an operation I picked up on the internet. I think one of the Facebook groups mentioned it, and it's Norris. I believe the guy's name is Tim Norris. He's a really interesting story. He had a farm out here. Things got tough. He started a new family. He sold off the farm, got a job at a grain elevator, eventually started accumulating property again, and bought a farm. And several years ago, he decided to set aside a certain amount, a small amount really, for sunflowers. and it's just spectacular. I don't really want to talk over it. Just take a look at these sunflowers. It was probably the best part of the trip. So once I left the grain farm, I actually headed into the village of Gambier. Gambier is the home to Kenyon College and maybe little else. This is the center path that cuts through the center of the village, also goes through the center campus. This is the entrance. While I was on campus, I took some pictures of the buildings, or some of the buildings at least. Here's the chapel, which I also think serves as a visitor center. Here's some other buildings. I tend to focus my photos on the older buildings, but I also know that there are also some newer contemporary looking buildings on the campus. These are the ones that drew my eye though. Also at the edge of campus down towards the trail, actually right on the trail, is this train. It brings quite a few visitors. There's also a rest stop along the trail there with restrooms. Lots of lessons learned during the trail. PPG plant, lots of history there that I didn't tell. I really needed more photos. Also needed more photos in Gambier and at Kenyon College. And how can I not have more train photos? But as far as this video goes and the ride, it's all history, and I'll see you next time.